Good evening, everybody. Since we don't have a big line back there now, I think we might get started. It is after 6 o'clock, and I guess I encourage everybody to move forward if you like, if you can get a better seat to see the screen when they discuss the process here. So if anybody wants to take a moment to move forward, go right ahead. First, I'd like to welcome everybody on behalf of the Department of Natural Resources and Commissioner of Public Lands, Peter Goldmark. And I am the Northwest Region Manager for the Department of Natural Resources. And this evening, I appreciate everybody taking the time to come out. It's one of the few days we don't have rain out there. And some of us probably rather be out doing yard work. You know, you kind of get behind on that with this weather we've been having. But I'm assuming everybody knows that tonight it has to deal with the proposed Lake Whatcom Intertrust Exchange. If you came here for something else, you know, you're at the wrong spot. What we're going to talk about tonight is the interest the county has in reconveying the trust lands in Whatcom County Watershed back to the county, and we'll get in more detail of that in a few minutes. But first, I'd like to make a few introductions, and I'd like to start with Pete Kremen, the executive for Whatcom County. And Pete, did you want to introduce any of your staff or folks here?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming here and being interested in something that I think is extremely important. But I do want to recognize our Parks Department Director, Mike McFarland. He has poured his heart and soul into this intertrust exchange, and it's been over a long haul, and we'll see what the presentation entails and what you all have to say and what questions you have, and it's just nice to have you all here.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to introduce some of the DNR folks that are here to help with this presentation. First off, we have Julie Sandberg from our Olympiad office involved with the transactions. And next to her is Stan Karowski. He'll be running the actual formal hearing when we get into the testimony. And then in the back, standing up there, I have Paul McFarland. He's been the local person that's been dealing with the knowledge and background on this intergrant exchange. And then we have Tammy Robbins from Olympia, and she's here to help and assist with tonight as well. With that, I want to make sure that if you had an opportunity in the back that you signed up to, those of you who want to testify later on. And if you look up here at our agenda, we kind of have a process to go through to kind of bring you up to speed on what this is all about tonight. We're going to have a presentation on the intertrust exchange, what it is and what it does. And then we'll have a period of question and answers so that you have an opportunity to ask us questions on anything that is confused to you or you have questions about before we actually get into the testimony. And we'll be taking testimony, formal testimony, on the intertrust exchange. And that's what we're proposing tonight. We're not going into whether or not, you know, that you should have the reconveyance or not. That's another issue, but it will be a discussion during the evening. So if you have questions about that, feel free to ask. With that, if there's no questions on just housekeeping and protocol here, I think we'll just move on to the presentation. And I'll ask Julie Sandberg to come up, and she'll kind of give you a 101 class on intertrust exchange.
Thank you. My name is Julie Sandberg. I'm the Assistant Division Manager for Transactions out of Olympia, and I'm here to tell you everything you ever wanted to know or thought you might want to know about an intertrust exchange. We are going to talk about the R word tonight, reconveyance. We'll get into a little bit of that tonight, but as Ben mentioned, we're here to educate you about the intertrust exchange, which is a key part of the lead up to that reconveyance. What's the purpose of an intertrust? I'm going to give you a little bit of background about what the trusts are and how DNR came to manage those types of state lands. But the objective for this intertrust is about 4 reasons that started several years ago when the county and the state started talking about how best to block up lands around Lake Whatcom for protection purposes. The first objective is we want large continuous blocks of land, whether it's in county ownership or DNR ownership for management purposes. We also want to reposition our assets, our trust lands, which are set up by statute, by constitution, to generate revenue for specific trust beneficiaries. We want to position those into areas best suited for DNR, as well as the county. We want to ensure equal value, trust for trust, and we want to position trust ownership for the R word. There are a number of state lands in this state. Many of you enjoy state parks. You hunt or fish on Department of Fish and Wildlife lands. The Department of Natural Resources manages what are called state trust lands. How did we acquire those? Well, at statehood, the federal government granted us Section 16 and 36 of each township. How many people in the room know the legal description for your property? Some of you do, okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about legal descriptions as we get into this. We also acquire state land to manage for DNR through county land that was transferred to State Forest Trust. We'll get into that because that's the key that leads us up to the reconveyance. We'll talk about lands that we purchase or trade for trust land. You hear about DNR doing large land exchanges, purchasing land, whether forest or agricultural land. That's how we acquire land into that trust land base. We get some lands gifted to us. And lastly, we purchase some lands for conservation purposes or natural areas. This is meant to boggle your mind. At statehood, this is what the federal government granted to the state of Washington. In each township across the state, Section 16 and 36 was granted to the state of Washington to use for specific trust purposes, for K through 12 education, for higher education, a very specific purpose to generate revenue for that specific land trust. In some cases, a Section 16 or 36 was taken up by the National U.S. Forest Service or a National Park Service. It wasn't available to us, so they gave us what they call lieu lands, and they just grabbed some other section in that township and gave it to us. So if you look at a state land map in the back, we brought a number of those for you to take a look at. It shows you all the state trust lands, and you can see the contrast between this hodgepodge of 16 and 36 dots, and then you'll see these nice pink blocks of land where over the last 100 years we have tried to manage our lands and purchase and trade and exchange to block it up so that they're in logical areas that we can better manage. We have a number of trusts that we manage. We probably have close to 15 different trusts. And again, the granted trusts were set up at statehood for either K through 12, for agricultural school, WSU, scientific school, university school. I don't know why UW and WSU aren't normal, but normal schools like Eastern, Central, Western, and Evergreen. There's a special trust for capital buildings so that when we put leases on that land or timber sales, the revenue goes back to that trust, a portion of the revenue. The CEPRI is, probably botched this one up, correctional, educational, penal, and reformatory institutions. So lands that when we generate revenue, it goes back to support those kinds of institutions. Then there are other trusts and managed lands, and we get into the specific county trust lands, state forest trust land transfer, and state forest purchase land. We have community and technical college, forest reserve, and then our conservation areas, natural areas and natural resource conservation areas. So again, just trying to get you a flavor of the Department of Natural Resources manages a wide variety of lands for different trust beneficiaries and to generate revenue for those folks. That's very key. Specifically, the county land. How did we acquire county land? In the 20s and 30s, a lot of private ownership forest land was logged over for revenue, and the owners then didn't know what to do with it, couldn't manage it, went into foreclosure. The counties took it back because those folks couldn't pay their taxes, and the county said, What are we going to do with all this unforested forest land? They didn't have the budgets or the know-how to do the silvicultural treatments. So the legislature passed a statute in 1923 that said the county could deed that land over to DNR. We would manage it on behalf of the counties, and that revenue, a portion of it, would go back to the counties. So you'll start hearing about terms like State Forest Transfer Trust, State Forest Purchase Trust. We'll slide these terms around, but I'll try to stay consistent. It's the county lands. Now we'll talk a little bit about the R word. So these lands the county couldn't manage were deeded back to DNR to manage. A statute was passed that said if a county wants their lands back, they can get them back, but only if they want them for park purposes. And this particular law specifically tells you what the county has to do. They have to identify where those properties are located, that they need them for a park, they're consistent with their county park plan, and they're consistent with a statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. They can put in a request to DNR and they can get their lands back. But again, for park purposes only. So this is where the reconveyance, it's like a yo-yo back and forth. So private land went into county ownership, they deeded it to the state to manage, but the county can reconvey it back, get it reconveyed back. So now we'll start getting into some maps and colors here. This is the Lake Whatcom Watershed that you see surrounded by the outer perimeter land. I think it's pink or red there. The different colors represent the different trust beneficiaries that are represented. Paul.
Just to be clear, this isn't exactly the watershed, it's the Lake Whatcom landscape management area. So some of you that know the ground well enough might recognize that this doesn't exactly conform to the watershed boundary. But
thank you. You didn't have to tell them that, Paul. I think most of them wouldn't have known that. So in general, this is the Lake Whatcom Watershed. On either side of the lake, you see these wonderful colors. And again, that's telling you there are different trusts that were acquired that DNR manages those lands for a specific purpose. If it's blue property, that's currently in county forest board land that we're managing, and the revenues go back to the county. They distribute those revenues to their junior taxing districts, hospitals, fire districts, etc. The hot pink color up there is common school, K through 12. That's the largest of the acreage that we manage across the state. DNR manages about 5 million acres of state land, 3 million upland, 2 million aquatic land. The bulk of those lands are pink or common school land. And again, if you take a look at the map in the back of the room, and there's one on the wall, you'll see how that pink is distributed across the state. The blue lands predominantly are in western Washington because that's where the forest lands are, hence State Forest Board lands. The other colors are smaller trusts. The orange is, help me out here, Paul. Capital grant, okay. So again, within that watershed and the interest that the county has in getting them better blocked up on either side of the lake, you've got a mix of trusts. That's why you're here tonight. We need to do an intertrust. We need to change the trust designation. We need to turn those other colors, the purple and the pink on either side of the lake, blue, and we need to find some other pink property outside that area, or blue property that we can turn pink. So if you're not confused now, I am. This map is intended to show you this is not an easy process. The county offered to the state that they would pay the cost of doing this intertrust to position us for that reconveyance request. And again, they can only request blue parcels for park purposes. So we're primarily focused on the lands closest to the lake that are not currently blue, and we need to turn them blue. A trust for trust exchange by law has to be equal valued. You can't have one trust benefit at the expense of the other. So what do? You go out and you do a fair market appraisal. And you look at the value of the timberland, you look at the value of the land itself. The higher and better use for that property might not be in forest land along the lake and other areas. It might be for development. But you have to balance out the values for those trusts. So this is portraying what we have in the Lake Whatcom Watershed, where we have on the left a variety of trusts that we want them all to turn into that state forest transfer or blue property. So back to a map, what we challenged the appraiser with was take these properties that are in the hash marks, we want you to appraise all of those so that the equal value plays out here. So when it's all said and done through the appraisal process, which is still being completed, you'll have it blocked up so that the odd colors that aren't blue turn blue, and those that are blue to the far southeast turn pink. So we want all blue blocked up around the lake itself. This is the acreage, 4,711 acres that were appraised. That was the challenge for the appraiser. Again, to work out that value and then show us where they would position the new trusts on the ground with that change of trust designation.
One other, I think, good thing to keep in mind here on this slide is that you look at it, and this map is on the back of the fact sheet that's on the table back here. All of the properties, all of the parcels, so-called, that are colored and that have hash marks on them are properties that were made available to the appraisers in order to achieve the balance that's required in the exchange. It doesn't necessarily mean that every one of those parcels will also be involved in the exchange. They need to have enough to work with in order to make the exchange balanced. So we generally try to give them a little more than they actually need. So, yeah, at the end of the day, all of these hash parcels may not be in the exchange.
Thank you. It's a monster project, and the county's paying dearly for it. So where we're at right now is waiting for that appraisal to complete, holding a hearing, and then ultimately, once we have the balance done with the values, we'll take it to the Board of Natural Resources. In general, this is the before and after. On the left, you have the before with the variety of colors around the lake, and again, I'm saying around the lake, but mainly the south half, a little bit up to the northeast, and the after map on the right, where voila, it all turned blue. For ease of presentation, we've shown all of that hot pink as one color because that becomes just anything other than that county land, but that's where they will piece and place those other trusts. The next steps for the intertrust, we'll gather the comments that we received tonight at the hearing. We'll present it to a Board of Natural Resources meeting, either June or July, and they meet every first Tuesday of each month except August. So we'll see if we can get that pulled together for June. If not, it'll bump to July. And then if the board approves it, then we move to close and change all of our GIS systems to reflect the appropriate trust on the ground. So at this time, we're going to move into the question and answer. And again, Stan will lead the hearing. He will serve as a hearing officer. I skipped the Q&A, didn't I? Was anybody noticing that? Okay. When we get done with that, we'll try to stay on schedule here, and at 7, move into the actual testimony part, but we'd like to open it up for question and answer. You can submit written comments. You can testify in person. They carry the same weight. The questions tonight should be directed to the intertrust, not the R word. But if you feel compelled to say a few words, so be it. Comment cards are in the back. Tammy has given us till May 31st for written comments to be received. You can do it by email. You can send in a hard copy. So a lot of different ways to provide your feedback. And again, we'll summarize those comments before the Board of Natural Resources and present the intertrust to them. That's the first step. And then there's another process for the county to move forward if they choose with the reconveyance.